In the heart of the forgotten town of Ashburn, Blackwood Manor stood like a ghost from another time, its decaying silhouette casting an eerie shadow over the quiet streets below. Once the pride of the town, the manor now seemed to breathe with an unnatural life, its towering spires rising sharply against the fog-drenched skyline and its cracked windows reflecting nothing but darkness. Whispers of the manor's sinister past had long plagued the town. Rumors of strange lights flickering in its windows, the chilling cries that echoed through the night air, and the mysterious disappearance of its last owner, Victor Blackwood. The town's elders spoke of it as if it were a cursed place, and they made sure to warn any outsiders who dared to ask about it. But despite its terrifying reputation, Blackwood Manor had remained a symbol of intrigue. Clara Evans, an investigative journalist known for her determination and unyielding search for truth, had heard the stories. She knew that the people of Ashbourne feared the manor, but to her, those stories were nothing more than folklore, superstitions passed down through generations. She didn't believe in curses or ghosts. To Clara, every mystery had an answer, and every question had a truth waiting to be uncovered. She needed a breakthrough story, and Blackwood Manor was her golden opportunity. The truth behind Victor Blackwood's disappearance was her prize, and she would stop at nothing to claim it. Armed with nothing more than a notebook, a flashlight, and an unrelenting determination, Clara ventured to Blackwood Manor. As she approached the massive front doors, they seemed to creak open on their own, revealing a sight she hadn't been prepared for. The air was thick, the walls seemingly suffocating with age and neglect. The inside of the manor was shrouded in darkness, and the faint smell of mildew and decay filled the air, as if the house itself had not seen light or life for years. The grand staircase loomed before her like a threatening beast, its wooden steps worn and warped by time, and the cobwebs hanging from the chandeliers created an almost surreal, haunting atmosphere. Every step Clara took echoed through the cavernous halls, amplifying the eerie silence that had consumed the manor. But as she walked deeper, it wasn't the silence that unsettled her. It was the feeling, the creeping sensation that she was being watched. With every flicker of her flashlight, Clara could feel it, the oppressive weight of something unseen, lurking just beyond her reach. The shadows themselves seemed to twist unnaturally, as though they were alive, shifting with the rhythm of her movements. A chill ran down her spine, but she pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets buried within these walls. In the dim light, she discovered fragments of Victor Blackwood's life. A shattered portrait of a man whose expression was frozen in a haunting grimace, cryptic messages scratched into the walls, and a journal filled with strange symbols and words that made no sense at first glance. As Clara delved deeper into the manor, the eerie phenomena escalated. The whispering voices began, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. The shadows no longer seemed to stay in their corners. They followed her, sliding across the walls and floors like specters from another world. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the manor itself was alive, breathing, watching, waiting. The deeper Clara went, the more she began to realize that she was not alone. These weren't just the remnants of a forgotten mansion. They were the remnants of something far more dangerous, something far darker than she had ever imagined. As Clara uncovered more of Victor's twisted past, his obsession with immortality and the dark rituals he had performed to achieve it, she began to understand that Blackwood Manor was not just a haunted house. It was a prison, a place where the souls of the damned were trapped, unable to move on. Clara wasn't just investigating the disappearance of a man. She was walking through a hellish maze of tortured souls, bound forever to the place that had consumed them. And now, the manor had its eyes on her. The question was no longer whether Clara could uncover the truth. It was whether she would survive long enough to leave. For in Blackwood Manor, the past never dies. The darkness is alive, and it has no intention of letting her, or anyone, escape. Clara Evans had always prided herself on her fearless approach to uncovering the truth. She wasn't one to be swayed by the rumors of old townsfolk, or the chilling stories that swirled around places like Blackwood Manor. To her, every legend had a beginning, every mystery an explanation. Armed with her camera, a sturdy notebook, and a mind sharp enough to cut through any lie, she ventured into Ashbourne. The town, as quiet as a graveyard, welcomed her with an eerie silence. No one greeted her, no one looked her way. The people knew better than to acknowledge someone who dared to investigate the manor. It was as if speaking of it out loud would unleash something worse than a mere haunting. But Clara wasn't afraid of superstitions. The manor loomed ahead, a twisted silhouette against the gray sky, its decaying walls towering like a monument to a forgotten past. The trees surrounding it were gnarled and leafless, their branches stretching out like skeletal hands reaching for the heavens. As Clara made her way closer, a strange shiver ran down her spine, but she quickly dismissed it. There was no place for fear in her world, only facts. Yet, as the iron gates creaked open before her, she couldn't help but feel that the very air around her had changed. It was thick, suffocating, almost as if the manor itself was aware of her arrival, waiting, hungry. The grand entrance loomed ahead, the heavy wooden doors cracked open as though inviting her in. The faint scent of mildew and something darker clung to the air, but Clara pushed forward, her curiosity outweighing her growing unease. With every step, the manor seemed to come alive around her, the wind whistling through broken windows, the distant sound of something scraping against stone. Yet, when Clara stepped inside, it was as though time had frozen. The manor was vast, a cavernous expanse of darkness and decay. The grand staircase rose before her, its banister twisted and broken, as if mocking the once beautiful structure it had been. Every floorboard beneath her feet groaned in protest, as if the house was aware of her intrusion and didn't welcome it. The further Clara ventured into the heart of Blackwood Manor, the more unsettling the silence became. It was oppressive, suffocating, and filled with an energy that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Her flashlight flickered, the beam cutting through the darkness like a blade, revealing rooms frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture, cobwebs clinging to every corner, and the faintest traces of something that didn't belong. A dark stain on the floor, a broken mirror reflecting her own haunted face. But it wasn't just the disarray that unsettled her. It was the feeling that she wasn't alone. The shadows in the corners seemed to shift when she wasn't looking, and the air grew colder with each passing second. Clara Evans had entered Blackwood Manor expecting to find a story. But what she found, as she stepped deeper into its malevolent embrace, was something far worse. A nightmare that was waiting for her to make the wrong move. The manor had already begun to claim her, and now the real game had begun. Clara's investigation into Blackwood Manor had only just begun, yet it was clear that nothing was as it seemed. The deeper she ventured into the manor, the more its oppressive, ancient energy seemed to envelop her. The walls, which had once been elegant and stately, were now crumbling under the weight of their own dark secrets. Each room she explored held a strange resonance, as if the very air had been thickened with years of sorrow and madness. The manor, it seemed, was not just a house. It was a prison, a vessel that held the secrets of the Blackwood family and the dark forces that had once been contained within its walls. Clara stumbled upon the remnants of Victor Blackwood's life, tucked away in forgotten corners, hidden beneath layers of dust and cobwebs. His personal journals, bound in cracked leather, contained passages that both intrigued and unsettled her. The further she read, the more she understood that Victor's obsession with immortality had consumed him entirely. He was not simply a man who sought wealth and power. He was a man driven by a hunger that could never be satisfied, a hunger that led him down a path of dark rituals and unspeakable acts. The journal spoke of experiments, strange, cryptic rituals that promised eternal life, but at a cost. Clara's heart raced as she read through the pages, a growing sense of dread crawling up her spine. What had Victor done in this very house? What had he unleashed? The manor began to change before Clara's eyes. The once quiet, empty hallways now seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The shadows, once still and stationary, began to shift, following her movements like sentient beings. At first, she dismissed it as the tricks of her own mind, the result of isolation and fear. But soon, the phenomena escalated. The temperature plummeted as if the manor itself was exhaling an icy breath, and Clara could hear whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs, just out of her reach. The whispers grew louder, the voices of unseen entities pressing against her ears, until she could no longer ignore the unmistakable truth. There were others in this house, others who had never left. As Clara descended further into the labyrinth of the manor, she discovered a hidden chamber, its entrance concealed beneath layers of rotting wood and stone. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with a presence that felt ancient and malevolent. The walls were adorned with strange symbols, etched into the stone in a pattern that seemed to move, shifting as her eyes scanned them. In the center of the room lay a large stone altar, stained with something dark, something that had not been washed away by time. It was then that Clara realized the true nature of Victor's obsession. He had not simply sought immortality for himself. He had tried to bind the souls of the living to the manor, trapping them in a twisted form of eternal servitude. The manor was no longer just a house. It was a tomb, a mausoleum for those who had dared to become part of his dark experiments. The realization hit Clara with the force of a sledgehammer. The manor, once a symbol of wealth and prestige, had become a prison for souls, and its master, Victor Blackwood, had succeeded in his twisted goal. He had achieved eternal life, not by preserving his body, but by enslaving the very souls of those around him, binding them to the house and to the rituals that he had crafted. Clara's stomach turned as she understood the full extent of Victor's madness. But the truth was more than just horrifying. It was dangerous. Victor's legacy was far from over. It lingered in the shadows of Blackwood Manor, waiting for anyone foolish enough to seek its secrets. And now, Clara realized, she had become part of that legacy. She was no longer just a journalist. She was a victim, a pawn in the game Victor had played for far too long. As the room seemed to close in around her, Clara's only thought was to escape, to run from this hellish nightmare that she had unwittingly stepped into. But the manor had other plans. The door slammed shut behind her, and the shadows seemed to grow darker, more sinister, as if the very walls were alive, watching, waiting. And Clara knew in that moment that leaving Blackwood Manor would be far more difficult than she had ever imagined. The manor had already begun to claim her, and there was no telling how far its reach extended. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as the truth she had been chasing began to unravel before her eyes. What had seemed like an old, crumbling mansion, a place abandoned by time, was now becoming a living nightmare. The deeper she delved, the more she realized that Blackwood Manor wasn't just haunted by the spirits of the past. It was alive with the twisted legacy of Victor Blackwood's dark experiments. Every step she took, every room she explored, seemed to reveal more fragments of the horror that had taken place here, leaving Clara with an overwhelming sense of dread that she couldn't shake. But she couldn't stop. The truth was close, and she could feel it tugging at her, urging her to keep going, to keep pushing deeper into the heart of this cursed place. The journal she had found earlier, the one that spoke of Victor's obsession with immortality, was no longer just a relic of a madman's delusions. It was a map, a blueprint of the horrors that had been unleashed in this very house. Victor Blackwood had sought something beyond life and death. He had dabbled in rituals and arcane practices that no one should have ever touched. The journal detailed his descent into madness, his growing obsession with capturing souls and binding them to the manor, creating a twisted tapestry of life and death that would keep him alive for eternity. But there was something even darker, something more insidious hidden within those pages. A warning. Clara had always been a skeptic. She believed in facts, in evidence, in things that could be explained by logic and reason. But what she was uncovering in Blackwood Manor could not be explained by reason. It was beyond comprehension. Victor's journal spoke of the threshold, a moment when the boundary between life and death would collapse, when the souls trapped in the manor would be freed, but only if another soul took their place. The truth hit Clara like a lightning bolt. She wasn't just investigating the past anymore. She was part of it. Blackwood Manor had no intention of letting her leave. It had claimed her, just as it had claimed Victor, just as it had claimed all those who had entered its doors before her. Clara's mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of the truth. She remembered the strange occurrences, the shifting shadows, the whispers that followed her as she moved through the house. It wasn't just the spirits of the dead that haunted Blackwood Manor. It was something much more dangerous, something that had been feeding on the souls of its victims, growing stronger with every passing year. Victor had become a part of it, his soul entwined with the very foundation of the manor. He had achieved what no man should ever hope to achieve: immortality, not through his body, but through his soul, through the souls of others. The manor had become a prison for the damned, each spirit trapped within its walls, bound to the house by a force far more powerful than any curse. But the truth was even more horrifying than Clara had imagined. The threshold was not just a moment in time, it was a choice. A soul must take the place of another in order to free the trapped spirits. And Clara, as the latest visitor to Blackwood Manor, had unknowingly walked into the ritual that would determine her fate. The manor had chosen her. She wasn't just a journalist uncovering the past. She was the key to breaking the cycle of horror that had plagued Blackwood Manor for generations. As the walls seemed to close in around her, Clara felt the weight of the truth settle over her like a suffocating blanket. She had been part of the story all along, a mere pawn in a game that she could never hope to win. The manor was not just a house. It was a living entity, a dark force that fed on the souls of those who dared to enter. And Clara realized, with a sinking feeling in her stomach, that she was not the first to come looking for answers. Many had tried before her, but none had left. The manor had claimed them all, and now it was coming for her. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway, and Clara spun around, her flashlight flickering in the darkness. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as though the manor itself was calling to her, drawing her in. But there was no escaping the truth. Blackwood Manor had already claimed her, and there was no way out. As Clara stood frozen in the darkness, she realized the full extent of her fate. She was not just uncovering a story, she was living it. The story had always been hers. The air around Clara grew thicker with every passing second, pressing in on her as the truth of Blackwood Manor wrapped around her like a cold, suffocating shroud. She had uncovered its secrets, the dark rituals, the tortured souls, the twisted legacy of Victor Blackwood. But now, with the full weight of what she had learned crashing down on her, she understood something even more terrifying. The manor was not just a prison for the dead, it was alive. It was a living, breathing entity that fed on the souls it trapped, growing stronger with each passing year. And it wasn't done with Clara yet. It was coming for her, and there was nowhere to hide. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled through the manor's labyrinthine halls, her flashlight casting frantic beams of light across the decaying walls. The manor seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, its very foundation shifting and groaning as if it was aware of her every move. The whispers in the air had turned into something far darker, a low, guttural growl that reverberated through the walls, the very sound of the manor's hunger. Clara had always prided herself on her ability to stay calm under pressure, but now the terror she had only heard about in rumors became a tangible, inescapable presence. The manor had been waiting for her, luring her into its clutches with its promises of mystery and intrigue. And now she was its prey. Desperation set in as Clara ran, her footsteps echoing off the stone floors. But no matter how fast she moved, the manor seemed to close in on her. It wasn't just the physical space that was shrinking. It was the very air around her. The walls seemed to close in, and the shadows reached out to grab her, pulling her deeper into the heart of the house. The familiar, cold dread she had felt when she first entered had now turned into a suffocating sense of finality. The manor had been waiting for this moment, the moment when it could claim her, just as it had claimed all the others before her. Clara's body was tired, her mind racing, but her instincts screamed at her to get out, to escape before it was too late. But there was no escaping now. The manor had made its choice, and Clara was its final victim. As she reached the center of the manor, the once grand foyer now stood in eerie silence, the air thick with the weight of the past. Her flashlight flickered one last time before plunging the room into darkness. The temperature dropped, and Clara felt a cold hand brush against her skin, an icy touch that froze her to the bone. Then she heard it. A voice, low and distorted, rising from the shadows. "You cannot escape, Clara. You never could." The voice was familiar. It was Victor Blackwood's, or rather, the thing that had once been Victor Blackwood. His soul, entwined with the manor, had become something more, something dark and monstrous. His body had rotted away, but his spirit remained, trapped, just like the others who had been claimed by the manor. The truth Clara had uncovered wasn't just a story. It was her fate. Victor's voice echoed through her mind as she tried to back away, her heart racing. "You will never leave. The manor owns you now. The cycle continues." It was then that Clara understood the full extent of her nightmare. The manor wasn't just trapping souls. It was feeding on them, drawing power from their suffering and despair. Victor had created something beyond life and death, something that no one could escape. Clara's pulse quickened as the walls seemed to pulse with Victor's presence, his shadow moving through the darkness like a serpent. She had been a fool to think she could leave with just a story. The manor didn't care about stories. It cared about souls, about binding them to its endless dark cycle. Clara's breath came in shallow gasps as she spun around, looking for any way to escape, but there was no escape. The doors were locked, the windows sealed tight. The manor had trapped her in its grasp, and now there was no way out. The whispers grew louder, the voices of the damned crying out from every corner of the room, calling to her, begging her to join them. Clara's legs gave way as she collapsed to the floor, her mind racing. She tried to scream, but the air around her was too thick, too heavy. She was suffocating, both physically and mentally, as the manor's power tightened around her. In that final, horrifying moment, Clara realized that she had become part of the story she had been trying to tell. She wasn't just a journalist uncovering the past. She was the final piece in a puzzle that had been hundreds of years in the making. And as the dark presence of Blackwood Manor closed in around her, she knew that no one would ever know what truly happened here. The manor would claim her soul, just as it had claimed so many others. Her story would fade into the shadows, forgotten by time, as Blackwood Manor continued its endless cycle of darkness, feeding on the souls of those who dared to uncover its secrets. The purpose of the message within the shadows of Blackwood Manor is to serve as a chilling reminder of the dangers of greed, curiosity, and seeking power beyond our control. The story unfolds to show how Clara, driven by ambition and a desire to uncover the truth, becomes ensnared in a web of darkness that ultimately consumes her. This tale speaks to the dangers of chasing something so powerful and consuming that it blurs the line between reason and madness. The larger message, especially for those who may be drawn to wealth, power, or fame without considering the consequences, is clear. Sometimes our deepest desires can become our worst nightmares. The pursuit of answers, if motivated by the wrong intentions, can lead to irrevocable consequences, just as Clara learned too late. The manor itself, a physical manifestation of greed, is not just a house but a metaphor for the dangers of unchecked ambition, the trap we set for ourselves when we ignore the warnings and pursue things that were never meant to be uncovered. For those who might read or watch this story, it serves as a reminder. Sometimes the pursuit of knowledge and power is not worth the cost, and in the end we must ask ourselves, how far are we willing to go to achieve our desires? Is it worth the price? The message is one of caution, of respecting the boundaries of nature, life, and death, and knowing when to stop. The story ultimately reflects that there are some things better left untouched, and some truths are too dangerous to uncover. It encourages us all to think twice before stepping into unknown territory, where our curiosity could be the very thing that leads to our downfall. The shadows of Blackwood Manor are not just a physical presence. They are the reminders of every soul that came before, and the chilling fate of those who dared to question the darkness.